I've decided what self-respecting, scientifically minded collector doesn't have an insect specimen display in his office somewhere behind him. So I'm on a mission to build that. I've ordered some bugs from Southeast Asia, just various, nothing too specific, just various stuff, including a couple of arachnids. And in the style of like a Victorian insect collection, I've going to build this box out of some old mahogany. This was a door frame that I got from my neighbor when I got a bunch of his tools and wood and material years ago, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. It's mahogany with some kind of really dark stain on it, so I'm going to rip that down into usable boards, build my display out of that, and maybe video it along the way. Carcass all glued up overnight. I decided to miter these corners. I don't usually like miters for corners. They're a little bit tricky to get right, and I just don't think they're as strong as some other kinds of joinery for corners. So I'm going to spline these things. To strengthen these corners, I cut some 1/4 inch splines in there. So I just set up my dado stack for 1/4 inch and a little stop block. Ran everything into 45 degrees. It doesn't go through. I'm going to cut some splines out of some more of this mahogany, put that in there, sand it, and then I'm going to separate the top from everything. Cut a bunch of slats 1/4 inch wide in the table saw. Use my little miter box to make a bunch of wedges. Gluing these guys in. Unfortunately, even though I used the same dado stack and the same setup for every single one of those joints and the same rip blade for every single one of these, some are just tighter than others. So I'm having a little 100 grit sandpaper and sand down the sides and custom fit each one of those into each of these, but at least none of them are too loose. Got the carcass pretty much done, routed out for the base. I glued on some closed cell foam onto a little piece of plywood, cut that so it fits right in the base there. I will have some eyes and a wire going all the way across to be able to hang that thing by. Next step is I've got to rabbet out the side of this to match the top, because I've already split the top off over here and put a little round over on the inside of that top. I've routed out the groove. This is going to be the seal. The glass is going to go in here, and then this is going to seal on the cabinet to try to keep as much dust and air out as possible. But since I used a router table, I'm having to use my chisel there and square off the corners for everything. I don't recommend using a router table for that stuff. I usually don't. I usually use a table saw, and I cut all these rabbets before I glue anything together. This time, with the way that these miters were, and I don't know, I guess I was just a little bit uncomfortable setting everything up and getting it exactly right, that I didn't cut these grooves first. If I do it again, I will. It occurs to me I could have said why I didn't like using that router table. First, I only have 1/4 inch shank rabbet bits this big, and you worry about breaking the shank bits when you're using really deep rabbets or routing really deep rabbets with it. The corner part, that's nothing. This is a tiny fragment of the amount of shavings that came out of this. I've swept off the table saw about 10 times and dumped it outside. Just so much dust, so much of the mahogany shavings in the air. And it's a really brash wood, or at least this old stuff that I have is very brash, so it's splintery. So the bit, as that big rabbit was coming around, it was constantly breaking off pieces, chipping off pieces. I mean, it all worked out. There's no chips or anything like that that's wrong in here. Everything came out good, but it was really uncomfortable. It took a very long time, particularly routing a deep rabbit like this. So the rabbit bit will only go up about, I don't know, maybe halfway or something like that. Any more than that, I'm sticking the shank so far up out of the router that I'm sure I'm going to break it. And I don't have a 1/2 inch shank rabbet bit. I should, but I did have another one with a bottom bearing, a 1/2 inch bit with a small bottom bearing, and that's what took it the rest of the way up. So this is actually 2 different bits, about 7 different gradients of height position, going really, really slow, and having that stuff flung all over me. in the air. That's why I didn't like using the router table, not because it didn't work fine. Internal rabbet is fitted and done. The door opens and closes pretty tightly on that little notch, and there's just enough of a groove on the inside. This is where I'm going to have double strength, like 1/8 inch glass, and then a felt gasket right in there to just try to seal it up a little bit more. So a little bit more sanding. I got a hinge coming in the mail, and I think I'm pretty much done until I get that hinge. Finish applied, polished up, using a little bit of this polishing and rubbing compounds. Pretty happy with the sheen on this stuff. I think it's gonna look good. There we go. Lighting's pretty terrible, but this is where I decided to put it. Got this kind of a hasp over here, so I think it looks pretty good. I got some solid brass hinges on the side. Next thing is going to be preparing the specimens and installing them. After hanging this on the wall using that wire, I was just not happy with the balance of it. I ended up putting a second anchor in the wall to spread the load across that wire, but then when I'd open this big old heavy door on the hinge side, the whole thing would want to rock off of those off that wire. So I took it down, decided to make a cleat. I originally didn't do this because there's just not a whole lot of space right here for the cleat to fit in. I didn't want screws, coming through the edge, but it is what it is. So this side of the cleat is going to fasten to the wall with those anchors, and it's at a 30-degree angle, right? And so that'll fasten to the wall, and then the cabinet will just slide down over it, and it'll have about this much back and forth. But this way, there's no way that cabinet is going to shift or come off the wall. Plus, I just had that wire going through these really small eyelets, and those could potentially pull out of this wood too, because it's just tiny, tiny stuff. I think they were, I don't remember if they're number 4 or number 6. Not a lot of meat to grab there. Here we go. This is how the specimens come in. Most of these are from Vietnam, or at least a dealer out there, an insect dealer. I'm going to say I have way too many butterflies for that one container, so I'm going to sort of pick and choose which ones of these things are going to work and fit in there, and then who knows, maybe I'll make another one just for butterflies sometime. Here's the start on the insects. Got a bunch of beetles laid out, a couple of hornets, just a few various things in here, cicada, lanternfly. I still have several more in the box I got to get to. Hopefully tomorrow. I'm just out of energy, out of back bending over, and time for the evening. All my creatures required a certain amount of prep before they could be put in the specimen box. These guys had lost a lot of their color, so needed to have their color all enhanced. Here it is now. Mostly stocked. The glare on that glass is pretty bad. Pretty okay, happy with this way this cabinet looks. Let me open this thing up for glare. There we go. So this one is sort of meant to be more of a macabre theme cabinet. I now see that I'm going to have a butterfly cabinet somewhere too. Several more creatures. I've ordered a few more creatures. They're in the mail coming, and I'm sure that I'm going to move things around in here. Some of the butterflies may go, some beetles get more bunched together. I'm going to change up some creatures now and then. So anyway, this is where I'm going to leave it now.